Hey, how's it going? This is a quick video on one of the most popular low-end enhancer type of plugins out there, BX Subfilter, which is currently free with Plugin Alliance. The thing is, a lot of people I notice are using this plugin without properly understanding what it's actually doing. And I'm making this video just to show you that this isn't black magic. It's not like let's magically make your bass sound crazy good or powerful. It's just kind of a clever implementation of an EQ. And I'm just gonna go through it in a more technical way, hopefully trying to make the concept quite simple. I'm not going to play any audio demonstration, but I just want to sort of show you what's happening under the hood so you can make better use of this tool. So let's check out our test oscillator. We're running a 70 hertz test tone into this, and we can check it out here on a spectrum analyzer. And the reason I'm doing this is that one of the claims I've heard about this plugin is that it enhances the bass harmonically. So if that was the case, we'll be able to see some harmonics here. So harmonics should appear in a spectrogram. For instance, say that I'm going to add a saturation plugin. Let's go for Radiator by Soundtoys. Now we can see that we have added harmonics here. The more we push the input, the more harmonics we get, because this is a saturation plugin. It's giving us that kind of harmonic enhancement. So whereas subfilter's behavior is a little bit different, as in we're not really getting any extra harmonics at the gain input stage, not on the output. We can crank it all the way up. It's still just our test tone, nothing extra going on. Maybe the processing is going to do something. No. Just getting the same test tone. So we can rule out harmonics here. And so let's see what's special about this plugin. What does it actually do? Let's go to a EQ curve analyzer. This can basically tell us what's happening under the hood. It's going to help us understand what's going on. So right now, it's all flat. What we have here is just a normal kind of linear input. It's not really changing anything. Output is not really changing anything. So far, so good. Let's see what's going on. What happens now if we go low end? Okay, now we're starting to see some change. So this is basically a shelf. This is a low shelf. It's boosting very broadly here our lows. And usually this is kind of something common to vintage style equalizers, which rely on pretty broad boosts to give you something that's more like tone shaping. So this is definitely not something surgical. It's more like a tone shaping tool. You can also go inverse. You can see the band is kind of different here. We're having a broader sort of shape to the curve here. But when we do go and cut that low end, it's a little bit more pronounced and less broad. So this essentially, it's a cool design because it kind of accentuates our low cut, but it doesn't really go too crazy. So you're not going to make your sound too thin. So this is a really good thing to know. So this is, by contrast, is a lot broader. So it's going to go into your low mids as well. So if you really crank this, you can expect some boost in the 200 hertz type of range as well, which can make things a little bit muddy. So now we know. And what happens now when we use the tight punch feature? So before I do anything, what's punch? That's a term that you hear quite a lot in music product marketing and things like that. But how do we define this? Punch is basically the impact of the low end, the impact of a transient in general. It's something that it's more how we perceive the impact of a sound. And with low end, especially, that's a big part of how we perceive punch. If we have something like this curve here, our low end is going to sound very woofy, very kind of muffled, very boomy. There's not going to be a very, very punchy sound. It's going to be kind of a muffled sound. And for years, mixing engineers employed a trick to maintain low end while enhancing a sense of punch. And that's how they do it. See, what's happening here is that tight punch is not boosting the low end like a lot of people believe when they use this plugin. It's actually cutting it. So we are getting a low cut filter here, which has a boost at the corner frequency, which is basically like the frequency that the low cut filter is starting to operate. It doesn't just cut it, it boosts a little bit of that bass, and then the rest it cuts it. And that's a good way to create punch, because if we were to just boost that bass this way, all this stuff is gonna just sound like woofiness. It's just gonna sound kind of like undefined bass boominess. And so if we try to get more 50 hertz, we're also getting a bunch more of that sub frequency rumble that's not really going to add to our sound. Whereas if we want to add more 50 hertz using this feature, we can basically get that. See how we got like a 8 dB boost at 50 hertz, which is quite a lot. But at the same time, none of this stuff is going to bother us as much because it's being cut down by the low cut filter. And that's the clever thing about this design. So it's essentially a low cut filter with a bump up at the corner frequency. So it goes up to 90 hertz and it kind of retains that same shape. It's really interesting. So one last feature is the resonance, which kind of defines the shape and intensity of this corner bump. So now we're on low mode. Let's set it to high. We're seeing that this peak is becoming a little bit more pronounced. Extreme is getting even narrower and more pronounced. So why do they call this resonance? That's because the peaks can cause resonances. The narrower you go, the more resonant a peak will be. If you try to crank up an EQ with a very narrow Q factor, you'll notice that it's going to create a resonance that, it's going to be quite audible, like a ringing type of sound. And this can be quite beneficial sometimes on bass sounds because it can create a sense of length, a sense of depth. Imagine, for example, you have a bass drum, which is really, really dry, maybe just a lot of attack, but not a lot of notes. That extra resonance can help you make that bass drum feel like it has more length, more notes. And that's something that you really have to be careful using it because if you just crank it like this, a lot of people just go for crazy settings with this plugin, which can be cool, but if you don't really know, if you don't really understand what's going on, you might risk ruining your mix just because bass, low end in general, is quite difficult to monitor properly without a good setup. Now that you know a little bit more about this plugin, you can use it in kind of interesting and intelligent ways. For instance, again, say that I want to make my bass drum a bit more punchy. I'm going to go for 70 hertz. And this is creating this kind of nice resonant peak, but we can make it even, let's go high. And it's cool, but maybe it's a little bit overkill. We have about like a 10 dB boost almost. So we can actually bring it down to a more sensitive level. So it seems like a lot, but actually still more low end overall than what we started with. So now if I bypass the plugin, we're still getting significantly more low end. So even a setting that if you just let the plugin interface, it might seem like you're cutting out a lot of bass, but actually you're still boosting bass. This could be a really good natural way to enhance the length of your kick drum, but without overwhelmingly, because things can get too much pretty fast with bass instruments. And just to demonstrate, essentially, you can do something similar with a regular EQ plugin. So let's drop in a, say, fab filter, kind of a standard, pretty well-known EQ. Let's see what happens. We can do something very much like it. We can select our corner frequency at 50 hertz, kind of a steep, pretty steep, say 30 dB per octave low cut. And now with our Q factor, we can create that sort of resonant filter. But yeah, you can definitely achieve a similar style of processing even with most EQs. But what's cool about that subfilter is that the filter curves are quite well designed and quite useful. So it's definitely handy to have. And it's, sometimes it might sound silly, but the interface, it's a bit more fun than a standard graphic EQ. So that can play a factor in making you more creative when you mix. But it's nice to have an awareness of what's going on under the hood so that you can make better decisions and be more aware of how you can use these tools. So thanks for watching. Hope this was interesting and useful. Subscribe for more, and thanks again. Cheers.